All right, boys and girls. Mr. Kitzmiller here, Mr. K. Today, we are going to tackle the onion. There's a number of different varieties. We happen to just have a regular sweet or yellow onion here. There are white onions. There are red onions. There are Vidalia onions. There are small onions. There are garlic onions. There are a number of different types of onions. Green onions I did not include here. This is your typical white onion, okay? Now, you've got two different parts of this. You've got the tip, which is, they can look a little bit similar if just glancing at it, but then you've got your root end. This is your root end right here. This is going to have the hairs that you see. This is a piece that holds your onion together, okay? Now, what we're going to look at today is doing a couple of different dices. We're going to look at doing two different ways to dice an onion. Then we're going to look at doing maybe a slice or a julienne with it, depending on what you're trying to do with it. Now, the way you want to first attack an onion, and you have to be careful with an onion. Why? Because at first, until you peel it, and even after you have peeled it and you're working with it, there are different layers to an onion that might have different skins in it. The outside skin is the most prevalent. And this stuff, especially this is where you really need a sharp knife. If you have a dull knife and you've got to push down through it and it doesn't do what you want, it's sink and roll on you. You're not going to have a flat edge on it until after a few cuts. So what I recommend is and you always want to leave the root end in contact. Do not cut this in until told to do so. But this top end, I want to cut that off. I just want to take it. Again, I'm using my, you see my claw technique, and I'm cutting straight down. Just want to cut right off the end. I'm not cutting a bunch of it off. Get rid of it and put that in. If you get the peel off of it, you can use it in your stock pot later. Now, for a dice, in most of your typical cuts, you're going to want to cut this directly in half. You've got the end that you cut off. Then you've got this end with the root. Lay it right on the end that you've already cut and try as best you can. And sometimes onions can get lopsided on you. You want to find your best cut. Go straight down through the center. Just go straight down through. Now this next part is when you're kind of peeling it. At this point, you've got a flat surface that's gonna stay where you want it to for the most part. Now, right here, you can see if you've ever peeled an onion before, there normally is one outer level that comes right off, and then there'll be another layer underneath it that's probably going to be not as rough, but maybe a little bit slicker. And depending on where the onion is in its growth process, there very easily could be another level growing right there. This one does not have it, but look for it because that one is the one that can get you in trouble. That's the one that can mess you up when you're trying to cut it. Again, I'm going to go ahead and peel this off. See, you can see right there, there's two different layers on it, right? It's easier to kind of pull that first one off, and that second one will come off without as much trouble. Some onions are very difficult to peel, and you just got to work with them. You'll get better with them the more you go. Now, there are two different ways to dice an onion. Okay, I'm going to show you the classical way first. I'm going to use this bigger size. Now, this is a classical way. This is a way that if you have come up or go to culinary school, you're going to see this, but they'll also show you another version of it. Now, first thing is you take this onion, and you get your knife down low because you're going to make cuts up the side of it. Apologize for the phone ringing in the background. Now, the key is you don't want too much pressure on your hand because if you put too much pressure, it's not going to let the knife go through. You've got to have the knife as close back as here because you've got to keep the knife blade parallel. And you're just going to try to cut, and you do not want to cut all the way through. Again, a sharp knife is very important at this point. I'm going to go slightly further up. And again, if you see where I'm cutting to, I'm not cutting all the way through. So now at this point, I've got three levels. 1, 2, 3. Now if I wanted to go to a smaller dice, I could put more levels in that as I went up. But all I'm doing is I'm going to go for kind of a medium dice. Now, the next cut is I take it, so I cut it from this end, right? Boom, boom, boom. Now I'm going to take my knife, and I'm going to, you've got the root toward the camera. I'm going to make slices down through the top of it, because it's very hard to see this. But I'm going to go, again, being careful not to go all the way through to the root. Depending on what size cut I needed, what size dice, is how wide I would make these as well. Now if you look at this, I've got slices all the way up. So at this point, I have 1, 2, 3 levels going up. Then going this way, I've cuts all the way down, and I'm leaving my root the whole time. Now this is when you get to the dice part. Take this, and it's going to try to fall apart on you. Just be careful. It's when your claw grip really comes into play. I've got my thumb back here. I've got my pinky right here holding it together. Got my fingers on top. And I'm just going to cut straight down through. Again, I've got to move my hand back. And guys, this is something that just takes practice. Again, you never do any of this at home without a parent or guardian there to watch you. Now, by making all those cuts through there, this thing breaks apart, and we've got a real nice size little dice in there. Onions cook down, so you don't have to be quite as perfect. But if you see that right there, you've got a nice fine, once these levels break apart, you've got a great little dice there. Okay. Now, there's another way that I guess people got tired of their employees cutting their fingers, so they discovered another way to dice an onion, which is much safer. It's actually quicker, and I think it does just as good a job. Depending on who I am cutting in front of, if I'm trying to impress my wife, I'll use the old school, but if I am trying to just get down to business, I will use the new. So in the original one, I would take this, remember I cut 1, 2, 3 up the end of it. Then I would cut down this is my root end. I would cut here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then I would turn it across and cut back this way. Now instead of doing those two cuts, we're going to take this onion, and I'm going to cut angles into it. I'm going to cut in at an angle all the way down, and by cutting those angles, it is going to kind of do those first two cuts together. Now, you take this knife, and this is, again, I don't have the best camera work here. I'm going to try to show you. I'm going to cut down. Again, don't cut through the root. Don't have too much pressure on your hand, or it won't let you cut through the onion. But if you see, I'm kind of trying to bring my angle up. I'm trying to cut down through the center. At the same time, I'm bringing my trajectory up. And then I'll get on this side. Now this is where it starts getting trickier, because you're going away from yourself. And you don't really like to do that. Some people will do exactly what I'm doing now, and they'll flip it around, and they'll cut toward themselves. Now, I normally do not condone cutting towards yourself, but sometimes you just kind of have to. See, at this point, you've got this little flowery thing going on here. That's kind of, if you ever had a blooming onion, that's kind of what they do. That's what the machine does. Then I'll take it, and I'll just cut down. Get down here on these ends, you can cut these off. You never want to waste anything. But if you see, you're going to get really close to the same cut that you got before. It's just going to be, it might be slightly different, but again, all this stuff is typically going to cook down, so you don't have to worry about it. So that's your two different ways to dice an onion. Get this out of the way. Now, we're going to look at trying to slice an onion. This could be used for a saute purpose maybe. If you wanted longer vegetables in it. Maybe if you were doing stir fry and you needed to have some nice long pieces. You're cooking a steak. I'm going to cut this. Remember, this is your root end. This is your tip end. Cut this tip end off. Be careful here. Remember, guys, it can roll on you. Now, I'm going to cut it directly. I'm going to cut a little bit of this root just because I want to get this hair off my board. You can cut part of that off without losing the whole root. Cutting board. I'm going to cut this in half. Now this is a much simpler cut, but we're still going to go. We got to peel it, right? These are easy peeling onions. Easy peeling onions. Now I like to use these when I'm doing, like I said, maybe a Philly cheesesteak, or if I'm cooking some mushrooms and onions for a steak. I might do that and put on top of it if I'm sauteing it. If I was doing a salad, I might do an application like this. But all you're going to do, you can do two different ways. You can just cut straight down across. These are just going to be your slices, right? You know, if you were using this for, again, a salad, this would be great. Depending on your thickness, you would want to cut them thicker. If you were doing something for a steak topper, cut it thinner. If you were doing something for a salad. But then if you wanted to, you could cut it in half. If you didn't want quite the same long strands, you could do the same cut. You're just going to have a slightly different piece. At this point, you're going to have these little half moons, right? That could still be another salad topper. You can do the exact same way. You could saute it for your steak, but if someone didn't like the longer stringy onions, that would maybe be an application for that right there.